seeing? I just got to see something magical in the parking lot of Walmart, of all places. I don't get it. This lady was trying to back out this way of her parking spot. This lady was trying to back out this way of her parking spot, and they almost hit each other. So I stopped short. Like, I'm not about to walk between all this nonsense that's going on here. But they stopped, and they both pulled forward. They were both going to let each other go. So they're like, they wave each other. Once, I guess, they both like, oh, okay, she's going to let me go. So they both start backing out again and almost hit each other again. Pull forward. So I'm still just sitting there waiting. There's a little girl in the back seat of the SUV. It was an SUV in a car. And she's going, like, waving at me. And I'm like, hey, sugar, how are you doing? And grandma's in the front seat losing her mind. She rolls her window down and yells at me, is she coming or not? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, so finally the car puts it in park. Like, I'm not even trying to back out. Just back out. Just get out of here. That lady lost her mind over backing out of a parking spot. She was, sweet Jesus. And I'm like, he is. 'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus and not back out of parking spots in a hurry. Oh my gosh, it was so funny. Woo-wee, that was a good time. I could end my day right now. So please, please, please don't lose your mind over backing out of a parking spot, please. Because what if, I just get this image of, what if God then said, invite that girl to church? Then you have to be like, oh. That's why I think that all the time. That's why I'm like, I ain't saying nothing. Because then if God's like, go invite them to church or go witness to them or something like that, I'm like, hey, I know I just yelled at you a lot over a parking spot. But do you want to come to church with me? 'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus. I think to give justice to this testimony, we have to go back 2 or 3 days. It was part of the 35-35. So my heart cry lately has been, God, show me what area of my life you want me to start pressing into and stewarding that is going to be the best expression of how I can show people you, how I can be the best light. What does that look like for me? Okay, let me give you a little bit of background about my life, some things that I've never talked about. I was a youth pastor for several years. I served as youth pastor at 2 different churches, and I think for a total of 5 years, maybe a little more. I've preached at 2 or 3 different churches. The church that I was raised in, where I spent, I don't know, the first 20 something years of my life, I used to be on a rotation where I would preach there once a month. The church that I now attend, I used to be on a rotation every Wednesday night where I would teach Bible study every Wednesday night. So there's been a long history of preach. I don't know if you want to say preaching. I mean, it is preaching the gospel, but just preaching, I don't know, just preaching. I don't really know how else to say it. Like I have, the Lord has blessed me with the ability to deliver a sermon, to hear a word and to deliver that word. So 4 years ago, my God, has it been that long? 4 years maybe? So we're in 2024. I remember this being during COVID, or maybe right before COVID was at a climax, which was 2020. So 3-4 years now. I was approached by our current worship leader, and I was asked to I was asked to sing on the worship team. So I've been on the worship team for 3 or 4 years. I have a really long history of preaching, not being a pastor or anything like that, but preaching. And so, and where my heart is right now, obviously, guys, is video and social media. Not even really social media, but just YouTube. So I have all these things in my life that I feel like that are possibles, that are potentials, that are opportunities. What do you want me to do, God? Because I'm good with any of it. I just want to make sure that I'm doing what you want me to do. I wanted to say all that to kind of lay the groundwork. And here's the thing. I've never really brought any of that up. I think I've mentioned I'm going to worship practice. So if you watch my vlogs, you could deduce that I'm on the worship team. But I've never talked about, I don't think, being a youth pastor or preaching or anything like that, because I've never wanted to be, I'm tripping on my words a lot. I don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to say, yeah, like I've preached a million times, and or I was a youth pastor for this or any of that, man. It's just serving God. I don't. The thing is I don't take it lightly, and I don't take it like, oh, it ain't no big deal. It's a huge deal for me, but I don't want to ever glorify myself. I don't ever want to write out my credentials for YouTube. That's not what I'm here to do. But in order to better give you guys how strong of a testimony this is, I want you guys to know that I didn't just have an idea of maybe God wants me to be a preacher, maybe God wants me to preach, and maybe I should dive into that area of my life. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of roots there. There's just a lot there. There's also a lot with worship. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of transformation in my life where God has placed me into just a heart place, I think is the best way to say it. God has molded my heart in the past few years to be a worshiper. And then I have you guys, my vlog, my YouTube. It's my favorite. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, back to the card. I've been talking to God so you guys have a better understanding of what all this means. I've been talking to God and saying, God, what area of my life do I press into? I don't want God to be calling me in the future, or God to have laid out for me in the future taken over a pastor position or something to that effect. And I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm not saying that's what would happen. I'm just saying if God is slowly whispering me, you need to be training yourself up because that's what the future looks like. I don't want to be ignoring that. I want to have my ear and my hand to the pulse of what God's wanting to do for my life. If God's going to have me have this huge following on YouTube and he wants me to really press in and put more of my heart behind YouTube, I want to hear that. I want to know what God has for my future. Also, worship. If that's the direction, the thing that I need to be pressing into more, I feel like that we have to, and I think I was saying this yesterday or the day before's vlog when I was talking about you have permission to be yourself, but everybody has to shine. Like, you don't have an option not to shine. Whether that shine looks like doing your job well and representing God on your job well, whether that shine is puppets or YouTube or singing or preaching or whatever it is, you have to shine. Like, you're a soldier, you're in this battle whether you like it or not. And I think that God has given each and every person gifts and places to where they shine really well when they get into this flow. And oh God. And see, this is why I almost hesitated to bring this up, because I'm like, I do a bunch of things. I'm not saying that I could do whatever. I could preach, I could worship, that's not what I'm saying. A lot of people have the ability to sing. A lot of people could put together a message, but that doesn't mean that God's calling them to press into that area. Like, just because I have the ability to put together a message and deliver a message doesn't mean that I'm anointed by God to pursue that for the rest of my life. Just because I have the ability to hold a note and to sing a song doesn't mean that God's calling me to do that for the rest of my life. And the same way with editing a video and putting together a video that's fun to watch, that doesn't mean that that's my calling. But for this season, I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like I have to say that and lay that groundwork. But for this season, God, what do you want me to press into? I think that card, that 35-35 card, was Thursday or Friday. And you guys probably remember Saturday's vlog, the one that I was talking about. There's so much freedom because I'm no longer worried about the opinions of men, and I'm no longer worried about being traditional when it comes to being, sharing the gospel and being a light. I no longer feel pressure, like all this pressure that is, if you're not behind a pulpit, then you're not really preaching and you're running from the call of God. And it's like, why can't the call of God on my life to share the light on YouTube? There's a need for that. Anyway, so there was all this freedom, and I felt amazing. That night I started thinking about the worship thing, because it as on top of YouTube, on top of all of that, there's been this pull, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but there's been this pull to dive into worship deeper. There's been this thing, and it's hard to describe, but you would probably know what I'm talking about if you're walking through it. It's a nagging thing in the bottom of your gut, just an uneasy, it's like, why do I keep thinking about this? Why does this keep coming up? And it's really uncomfortable for me. And let me get vulnerable. Let me just get real vulnerable. I think the only way that I really truly know how to say this is I don't want to do something just because it's the popular thing to do. I don't want to follow a trend. I want to follow Jesus. So I've been having this nagging thing on the inside of me that is wanting to press into worship. I've been wanting to look into getting a guitar, learning guitar, and press into playing guitar and worshiping. And that's been really hard for me because we live in an era and in a world of like some phenomenal and really popular worship leaders, like that are really, really popular. And if I started naming them, you guys would know them. And I don't just want to go and buy a guitar and be like, yeah, and follow just a popular culture kind of thing. So almost I would squash that because it is real popular, and I'm not saying it's trendy, and I'm not saying, dang, why can't I just say what I'm feeling and not have to feel like that I'm going to get misrepresented? But whatever. I'm not saying that everybody that you see on TV who's singing popular worship songs nowadays is just trying to be trendy and they're just doing the popular thing. No, they're called to God to do that, but they are. That doesn't mean that I am, just because I like to sing or something like that. So I was almost hesitant, and I'm almost burying that thing like, no, don't go buy a guitar. Like, that's not you. That's not you. That's not you. And I couldn't squash it. So I hop on Facebook Marketplace and I'm like, let me look for a guitar because maybe I'll start playing the guitar a little bit, and I just have this pull towards worship, and I just have this freedom and YouTube and all of that. So by now, we've probably been rolling for like 15, 20 minutes, and you're wondering, where's the testimony part of all this? I'm getting there. I just have to tell you because if I just tell you, hey, somebody did this, like it's not going to mean anything. But if I tell you where I've been and where I'm going, it makes the testimony so much stronger. So Sunday worship, we're all worshiping. It's phenomenal. But there's a friend of our worship pastor who is in town. He took vacation, came down to Florida, and but he's a worship leader in, I think it's Iowa. And he is not standing in for our worship leader, but he stood in for our worship because he plays the acoustic guitar. And he leads worship up north, so he came and he wanted to sing with us and play guitar because we currently, right now, we don't have an acoustic guitar player. And it was phenomenal. It was so good. It was awesome. Worship was awesome. After worship, he came up to me and he said, are you getting the message now? And I'm like, you shut your mouth. Don't talk like you don't know me. You don't know me, because all during worship, all I could do was look over and I seen this guy. And it's not a coincidence, guys. It's not. And I know sometimes I'm really bad at storytelling because I talk so much and I talk in circles. But here I am, a guy who is just trying to figure out, God, what do you want me to do? And I have different talents and abilities, but I don't want to pursue any one thing unless I know that's what you're wanting me to pursue. And I'm thinking about worship and thinking, is a guitar the right way? Is worship the right way? Is that what you're wanting me to do? And am I supposed to be, preaching and all of that? And I get a word on Saturday that says, hey, like, step out of the mold, start worrying about the opinions of men, and pursue YouTube, which is your passion, instead of thinking that you have to be behind a pulpit and traditional to be a preacher. Then here comes Sunday. Sunday morning, I'm looking at Facebook Marketplace looking for guitars, and all during service, all I can see is look over and see this guy, and all God is putting on my heart is, that's what it looks like. That's what you're supposed to look like. That's what I want you to look like. That's what it looks like for someone who's sold out with a heart of worship to lead people in worship. And I'm like, okay, God, like, I'm starting to get the message. And here is the climax of the testimony. Here is the cool thing. So he gets off stage and he's like, hey, are you getting it now? And I'm like, because he had no idea that God was telling me all of that, but he knew that God was speaking to me and trying to lead me. And he said, okay, all right, like, I'm going to come down here again eventually, and I want to see you up there leading. And I'm like, okay. And he says, what do you do? Do you have any kind of musical talents? Like, do you play anything? Do you do anything? And I'm like, no, like, way long time ago, I used to like piddle like a little bit on the guitar, but I was never like a guitar player. He goes, give me your address. As soon as I get home, I have an extra guitar. I'm going to box it up and I'm going to ship it to you. You need to start playing the guitar. And I'm like, so more than likely, I'll have to edit this to pieces. But we got here for a reason, and all of that was said to get here. First off, he's faithful, and second, he doesn't have a task for you to do, and God doesn't call you to do something and then just be like, figure it out, like, or get frustrated when we haven't got there, or we're not getting it, or we're second guessing it. He longs for us to step into that even more than we do. And even after 37 years of my life and trying to figure things out, he's still, if you'll press into this thing, I'm not going to drop it in your lap because I need you to press in, but if you'll press into this thing and really seek me, I'll show you exactly what I want you to do, and I'll open the doors. So that is my testimony. I almost said Tuesday. It's not Tuesday, it's Monday. But that's my testimony Monday. Let's end it there.